Hello, and welcome to the Urban Exodus podcast, a show that celebrates country living and shares the stories of people who are crafting creative, sustainable, and self-sufficient lives in the country. My name is Alyssa Hessler, and I'm the founder of Urban Exodus. I'm so glad to have you with us. A movement is underway of people abandoning the emotional, physical, and financial expense of city living and crafting their own purpose, livelihoods, and joy in the rural reaches. Although each person's story is unique, they share the same desires of reconnecting with the natural world, becoming more self-reliant, and having space to breathe and room to grow. This podcast celebrates those brave enough to follow their bliss down the road less traveled. In today's episode, I speak to Sara and Rich Combs, the owners and operators of the Joshua Treehouse properties, about their experiences of starting their business after moving away from the graphic design world in San Francisco. Their love affair with the desert began in 2011. The couple began escaping to the Mojave on weekends. Sara and Rich found the desert landscape so surreal that it brought out a childhood curiosity in them, and it provided their creativity with sustenance that nourished their inner well-being. Their getaways to the desert inspired them to buy an investment property and renovate it using their own distinctive design instincts. The home quickly became such a popular AirBnB destination that they rarely had the opportunity to stay there themselves. And in early 2016, they decided to throw caution to the wind and move full-time to Joshua Tree. At first, they honestly weren't sure if leaving the city would mean that their freelance design work would dry up, but they were willing to hustle even harder just to make it work. Thankfully, Sara and Rich found that their move actually presented them with more and varied creative work, not less. Now they own and operate a total of 3 desert retreats, all outfitted in their signature style and comforts. They incorporate their love of the outdoors and the beauty of the landscape into their homes. Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your background and how you met and moved to California in the first place?
Yeah, so we actually met in high school. So we've been dating since we were 15. We were just realizing last night we're about to be together for 18 years, which is really wild to think about, over half of our lives. So we've definitely been through a lot together, and I think part of what brought us together in the first place was we both love art and design. We used to go to figure drawing classes together as dates, and we ended up going to art school together and ultimately moved cross country and became web designers for a while and wanted to start building something of our own, which is, that's when we started the Joshua Treehouse.
So you started doing web design, and did you start doing web design in San Francisco? What did that look like? Were you working for a company? Were you working together at a company, or are you working in separate places?
Yeah, so I did web design, 2 internships during college in Washington, D.C. And that's basically where I learned web design. And one of my coworkers in D.C., he got a job in the Bay Area, and he recommended me for one of his teams. And that basically is the job that moved us across the country. And then during that time, just web designers were so sought out and so on. Sara started picking up web design jobs and basically growing her portfolio as well. And that's kind of what got us into, or both of us, into web design.
Why did you gravitate towards San Francisco? Did you like San Francisco? Do you continually go back there to visit, or do you feel like it was a good time and you're glad that that's behind you now?
Being East Coasters, I think the idea of California was so dreamy, and actually I had never even been to California before stepping foot in San Francisco to walk into our apartment that we had rented over Craigslist.
And I was only there like 1 week earlier for the first time for my interview. So
I think
neither
it
one of
was,
us had ever really been to California.
yeah, this idea of California was really dreamy in our minds. And then when Rich had the connection to get a job in San Francisco, we are like, perfect. This is meant to be. This is it. And we still love San Francisco. It's such a beautiful city, and going back to visit is always really fun. But I think ultimately we were craving a chance to build something of our own, which was something we've done a lot throughout our relationship too. We're always seeming to try and have some business or little side gig of our own. And then also just after being in San Francisco for a while and everything so tech focused, we really started craving being able to work with our hands again and be out in nature more and more connected to our surroundings.
Yeah, it was also just a really exciting time to be in San Francisco because it was this time where a lot of like companies were like a lot of people and companies were both kind of struggling, but then they were very, very creative in how to start something new. I think that there's just looking at like maybe obviously there was a lot of bad things that happened during a recession, but then there was also like a lot of creativity and stuff, and people became a little bit more scrappy. And it was a very interesting and educational time to be in that part of the world. So I think we were able to learn a lot about starting companies and what not to do, what to do, so on.
Graduating during the recession definitely affected us.
Yeah, that was a little bit rough.
Yeah. I got out like 3 years before. So when you said that they scaled down, I completely understand that, because there was one other project manager hired at my graphic design firm that was hired a year after me, who had just gotten out of school, and she got laid off. And that, it was brutal for young people to try to, especially if you have school loans or other things that you have to pay off.
Yeah,
that was definitely tough.
When was the first time that you visited Joshua Tree, and what was your first experience there that really made you think that, wow, this is a really special place and we need to think about this some more?
Well, we had quit our jobs, our full-time jobs as web designers at the end of 2013, and honestly didn't really have a plan. We just kind of figured, do we want to do this forever? The answer was no. So we said, let's just go for it. We started freelancing just with some connections that we had from living in San Francisco, and started just testing the boundaries of where and when we could work. Could we travel and work out of our car? And so we just went on this road trip cross country. We started in San Francisco and ended in New York. And along the way, we stopped at different national parks that we'd never been to before. Joshua Tree was one of them. At that time, especially, Joshua Tree really stuck out to us as this place where we felt creative and people just wanted to stop and talk, and it felt a little slower pace that we had been craving. The landscape was so surreal and just made us feel like kids again, and brought back that curiosity and exploration that we had been missing. So by the time that we got to New York, we were still thinking about those experiences and craving to go back to it. But at that point, we didn't really know what was happening. We thought maybe we'd move to New York full time. But ultimately, when we drove back to go get our stuff, is what we thought we were doing, to go move to New York, we drove back into Southern California, and we looked at each other and it just felt right being there. So we pretty much immediately started looking for houses in Joshua Tree.
So you originally decided to buy a small house in Joshua Tree as an investment property that you could rent on Airbnb to cover expenses. What was your initial learning curve like for this first rehab project? And what, if any, pain points did you experience when you started running a short-term vacation property from San Francisco?
Basically, what our plan was that if we were web designers, we had to kind of have a connection to like San Francisco or New York, kind of like the two big spots for design and tech. And our thought was that we would like go spend as much of our time as possible in Joshua Tree, and that would be our creative retreat, the place that like we found inspiration in, that we did a lot of our work, but that we would still have a place maybe in San Francisco or maybe eventually in New York or something, and just kind of go back and forth. That was like the original thought, and that we would just kind of, we were like, if we could just rent our place for just like X amount of days, that we would be able to cover the mortgage and make this feasible. That was really all that we were thinking when we were buying the original Josh Treehouse.
So what did you do as far as rehab for that first project? And did that really, fan the flames inside of, wow, working with our hands and visualizing a project with interior design is so exciting?
Yeah, that was a great starter project for us because we, up until that point, had only done a little bit of renovation work. So getting into this house, we really just freshened things up. We were painting and putting in new light fixtures and really doing a lot of the interior design work. It didn't need a whole lot. So that was a great first project, but it really, as you said, got us excited, and we were immediately craving doing another project, and we're able to gain a little bit of confidence through that we could get a little bit more complex.
Well, now this is your basically fourth project, because I almost count the Joshua Treehouse, the two renovations, as separate pieces. What have you learned? What can you do now with your hands that you couldn't before you moved away from the city?
I always joke that Rich could be an electrician now if he wanted. It's always a really good backup plan.
Yeah.
I think he thoroughly enjoys that, getting very technical.
Yeah, there's still a lot to learn on that, but yeah, that's kind of my favorite piece, is the electrical.
Yeah, and tiling is pretty fun too.
Yeah.
We like doing that together.
Yeah, I'll be cutting, and then Sarah will be using the thin set and putting it up on the wall. And
we're just always having to solve something. So we've gotten to the point where we don't get so stressed out about solving something anymore. It's nice to know what the problem is. Then we know that there's always a solution. So that has brought a lot of peace that maybe we didn't have in the beginning when we were trying to figure out everything for the first time.
So let's talk about Joshua Treehouse. When did you start the brand for Joshua Treehouse? Was that in your first property, or was that created after you found your second property?
Well, we actually, the name came with the first house. We bought it for sale by owner. We actually found it on Craigslist. The owner told us this place is named the Joshua Treehouse, and don't let anyone take that name from you. So we kept it. And then it didn't start as an intention to build a brand. Like we had said before, it was meant to be our creative retreat. And we started an Instagram account for it because when we were away, we were craving seeing photos of the desert. And so we actually started it because it just didn't seem like anyone was doing that. And we thought other people might want to see that too. And then it sort of just started becoming its own thing. We could never stay at the Joshua Treehouse because it booked out so much. And then we started looking for another place to call our own and maybe move there full time, which is when we found the Hacienda and Casita. And then I think kind of when we got those places, and then now all of a sudden there's two places to rent, it started becoming more of a brand. I think at that point we did sort of a loose logo for it. And, really the past couple of years, I would say, is when we've really realized this is a lifestyle brand. There's more to it. We've fallen in love with creating experiences for people where they can come out in nature, have a chance to slow down, reflect, and reset. And we believe that everything flows in cycles, and that if we're going to have the energy to create, that we need to also reflect and reset. So that's something we talk about a lot.
Well, you've been so busy now on all of these projects. How do you carve out time for that for yourselves?
Last year was pretty crazy. You have to be honest.
Yeah.
That there wasn't really much time to be able to carve out for ourselves. So it had to always be really small moments. There was a lot of pressure for us last year as we had taken out a hard money loan for the year. So there was a very strict timeline to finish renovations and refinance the place. But chances to reset came in small moments like sunset. We would just make sure every day we just stop when the sun is setting, watch the sunset, or go and walk out in the desert during sunset, something simple like that. Hiking is actually a really great thing for us when we have a little bit more time. We love just going and exploring the national parks.
Yeah, and for this project, like the Tucson project, whenever we went back home to JT, that would be kind of our chance to rest a little bit. When we're in Tucson, it's just like constant hustle.
So you mentioned bringing in a hard money loan for Pasada. How do you assess risk and what helps you to take risks when you're expanding your business model and your brand in a rural area?
Well, honestly, it was terrifying. Last year just felt like a crazy weight on our shoulders, but we rely a lot on our intuition and instincts. And as soon as we stepped foot on this property, the same feeling that we had when we first stepped foot onto the Joshua Treehouse property arose. And we can't ignore that feeling. It just, we knew we could do this. We knew that we would put everything and anything that we had into it, but it just felt right.
We both felt that same excitement. So anytime that's happened in the past, we've just trusted our instincts and intuition. And
we've had to get a little more specific, though, of course, with finances. When we first did the Joshua Treehouse, it was very quick math. We said, if we could rent this 5 nights a month, we're fine. This, we got a little more specific in spreadsheets, and we have a really lovely brand manager who's very good with numbers because that's not our strong suit.
During escrow, we made it like a 60-day escrow, I think. So we spent basically 2 solid months just trying to make sure that, like, in this scenario, if we do this, will we be able to like pay the hard money loan, even just on a monthly basis.
So let's talk first about the Joshua Tree House, the hacienda and casita. How did you find that property, and what convinced you that property was meant to be the home that you would finally plant roots in Joshua Tree?
Well, it's kind of funny because we were basically scheduling our time at the original Josh Tree House and trying to figure out when we can get down there. And when we were down there, we were down there, I think, for Thanksgiving with Sarah's family. And we just were always looking at real estate because I feel like once you actually buy a house, you're kind of always just kind of curious what else is around you. And this house came up for sale. It was the Hacienda Casita. And it had this amazing garden. And Sarah and I were just kind of like, man, like, I don't think that we can buy another house right now. It's only been like 10 months, but it would just be really fun to go check out the garden. So we asked our real estate agent about it, and he brought us over there. And as soon as we, again, stepped foot on that property, we were just so in love with it. And we were like, man, this is not good. And then we brought Sarah's family over, and once they saw it, they were like, you guys need to buy this property. And then
we expected them to say, oh, this is a terrible idea. You just got a house. Why would you get another house? But they encouraged it. So we're like, okay, well, if they think this is a good idea.
Yeah. And that's not usually like them to, like, I guess, say that we should do something kind of crazy like that. So when they said it, we were like, all right, maybe this is a good idea.
This season of the Urban Exodus podcast is brought to you by Jake.art. Bring the beauty of the outdoors in. Search their collection of affordable, high-quality fine art prints by color or theme to find just the right work for your home or office. Whether you need a visual escape into the beauty of the natural world while stuck indoors, or want to send a thoughtful gift over the holidays, Jake.art, that's JAKE.art, has you covered. You have such a distinct design sensibility, and it does feel specifically Southwestern. Are you influenced by your surroundings there, or do you feel like that was innate in you before you even moved to Joshua Tree, the style that you have in your interior design?
We thought about this a lot when we were writing our book, trying to figure out, okay, we talk about intuition a lot, but what exactly is it that has influenced our style, or what makes us make certain decisions? And so we wrote out our design mantras, and one of them is based on your surrounding environment. And we realized that all of the places that we have lived play a part in it, and it grows over time and evolves and shifts with those landscapes and what sticks out to us in each place. We're inspired by the color of the cacti and the sand and the way that the sun sets, and being in the Southwest now for so long, definitely the surroundings are affecting our aesthetic.
Yeah, well, we definitely take the local environment as inspiration. But if we were to do something like in New England or something like where we're from, like we would design it to feel like it belongs there.
If the you from 5 years ago in San Francisco looked at you now, would they be like, couldn't believe that you're in the hotel business, essentially?
Yeah. 5 or especially 6 years ago, us would be like, what? So confused. How did that happen?
What's kind of funny is my family had an inn for almost 100 years in Connecticut. So my dad spent the first half of his life working on that inn, and growing up, that's all the stories that, like, a lot of the stories that he was telling were from that inn. And since Sarah and I have been together for so long, she also heard a lot of those stories frequently. It's not something that we thought that we would do, but at the same time, it's kind of interesting that now we're doing that.
It's in your blood.
It makes so much sense, but it wasn't something that I don't think either of us had thought about.
Yeah, I think that we were both very influenced by that. Yeah, those stories.
I've noticed that you work with a lot of small artisans when you craft your homes. And I know that it's not always the most cost-efficient route, but what is your philosophy when it comes to sourcing unique design materials from small businesses?
Yeah, so I think whenever we go into a new area, I mean, specifically Joshua Tree and Tucson, we always want to see what the creative energy is in those areas, and work with local artists and artisans and makers to incorporate that in the spaces in the houses. So if we were just to buy anything like generic, I don't think that would have the same soul of the local artists and designers. So yeah, I think it's really important to be inspired by the local community, and then also work with them as much as possible.
Yeah, it's a great way to connect to a place. And for Pasada, for example, we were able to have different artists and woodworkers and ceramicists actually come into the space and be a part of it. And that made it so much more fun for us to be able to collaborate. I think collaboration is definitely a key to giving us energy in life to keep going. And it feels good.
What did you learn from your previous work at Joshua Treehouse that guided your decision-making process while setting up Pasada?
I mean, obviously, just flow through spaces and what materials we like to work with. I guess a lot of, again, like every single project, we kind of learn like what not to do, as well as we kind of keep on honing in on our actual design aesthetic, like what we really like. I think Pasada is kind of the culmination of a lot of those things, those previous 3 projects or 4 projects coming together.
And what made you decide on Tucson? Were you looking for a while in Tucson?
We had a few places that we knew we felt connected to on that initial road trip. And it just happened that I always call him Detective Richie. He's always scouring the internet, finding all these things that I don't know how he finds them. But he found this listing for the Pasada property. It was an old bed and breakfast that had been abandoned and was just, it's so surreal to me, to us, that it had been left for so long because it was exactly what we had ever dreamt of.
How long was it abandoned before you were able to purchase the property?
I think they started tearing it apart in 2006, 2008 is when they started doing some renovations to it.
Yeah, it was about 10 years.
Yeah. And then during the recession, so I think end of 2008, with the stock market crash and so on, they stopped doing renovations and just kind of let it sit there. But there was a man that was living on the property that they had hired just to like maintain it and make sure that the place didn't completely fall apart.
With all your properties located in arid regions of the Southwest, are you worried about access to water in the future? And have you put any plans or systems in place to help mitigate potential effects of drought or public water shortages?
That's something that Sarah and I have talked a lot about over the last 5 years, is obviously water consumption and coming into these areas where water is very scarce, like what we can basically start planning for to obviously reduce our consumption, but then conserve water and then have other backup plans as well.
Yeah, so we talked to the watershed here, and they told us that the whole city of Tucson could actually survive off of just rainwater, which really blew our minds. And that's something we would love to start transitioning. And we actually just got our first rain barrel, should be getting here today, actually. So we're going to start experimenting with that and see if eventually we can just run this place off of rainwater.
What are some things about living in the desert that you had to learn the hard way? If there are people that are interested in moving to the desert, but maybe they've never lived in an arid region, what would you recommend they specifically look into when it comes to finding a property that works for them?
Well, if they are just getting land, it is, of course, very important to have a piece of land that has water. Doing a well could be extremely expensive, especially in Joshua Tree, where it's much drier and you might have to go pretty deep.
Yeah, I mean, in the desert, pay attention to where washes are. Make sure that there's a buildable spot. We've had so many roof issues over the years, just constantly replacing the roof, or like in the desert, the roofs just kind of dry out faster. So you have to keep on putting this rubber coating over top of them to try to prevent leaks.
Yeah, ironically, in a place with little water, most of our issues have had to do with water. Well, as Rich said, you have to think about washes. There's been a few times living in Joshua Tree that the whole main highway has gotten completely washed out because when it does rain, it rains hard and there's nowhere for the water to go because the soil is so dry, it doesn't soak in. It just sort of flows and creates these rivers and brings all of the sand down wherever it's going. So it'll actually block off whole roads. And we've seen cars buried in mud.
Obviously, you guys have been able to create this really thriving kind of career for yourselves, reinvent yourselves by moving to the Mojave. What do a lot of your friends do that live in the Mojave Desert? I know that working in a rural area is really hard. Are most of your friends small business owners, or do they work for people? How do people make a living there?
Yeah, kind of a variety of different things. There's people that are small business owners, people telecommute. It's kind of we always say it's the best time in history to live in the desert because with the internet, we're now more connected, as well as having local grocery stores and farmers markets and so on that are just kind of more readily available.
Yeah, I would say most of our friends have their own business of some sort, whether they're an artist creating their own work or have a shop in town or a small restaurant in town. It's a good mix.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want people to know about the community of Joshua Tree, its history, the integrity, the people that you've met there? And what about the people who've lived there their whole lives? Have you met a lot of people who've always been in the desert?
Yeah, we've met, I would say not a ton of people that have been there their entire lives, but there's definitely quite a few. There's a
That have
lot of
been
people
there for a
that
long
have been
time.
there for a really long time. Yeah. I'd want people to think about Joshua Tree as this creative community that people go there because they want to get away from the city, or they want solitude and silence, and are completely in love with the natural landscape. And I guess how we can uh, keep supporting it as that type of community, and then protect the local environment as well.
Oftentimes, people feel like if they move away from a city, their social lives will be negatively impacted. Do you feel more socially isolated there, or do you feel like you have a stronger community and more friends than you had before?
Yeah, a lot of people have asked that too. Do we get lonely out in the desert? And we've actually found it to be quite the opposite, that we are able to spend more quality time now with our friends because when we do see them, it's not just a quick dinner catch up once a month. It's a full weekend together or a few days, even a week at a time. They'll come stay at our house and we go hiking and camping and make dinners together. And with our friends that live in Joshua Tree, we, instead of going out to restaurants most of the time, we go over each other's houses and make food, or we go on a hike instead of going out to a bar. And we have just loved that.
You have been together for 18 years. Congratulations. That's quite an accomplishment at how young you are. And you also work alongside one another most days. Do you have distinct roles that you each play, or is collaboration the key to your success?
I mean, definitely collaboration, but we each kind of have our own strong points, and we kind of rely on each other to, I guess, take control of those aspects of our business.
Yeah, we both have a background in art and design, but Rich is much more of the precise analytical version, and I'm a little bit more of a looser, how does it feel kind of
Mm-hmm.
designer. So Rich will often take on more of the business aspects, like financially, he's usually paying the bills and
Which I'm not very good at either, but that's something I
he's
do.
better at it. And I'll take on more of the marketing roles. How do we share this out? I do our Instagram account, and the parts that we love the most are designing. And so we do that together.
This episode is brought to you by the workshops at How Hill Farm, a new photography and creative workshop series. The workshops at How Hill Farm offer learning experiences that encourage you to experiment with new techniques, hone your creative vision, and advance your professional opportunities. Workshops are virtual. Check out How Hill Farm's full offering of winter and spring classes at howhillfarm.com, spelled HOWE, and stay up to date by following HOWE Hill Farm on Instagram. When we visited back in 2018, you had just finished your first book and it released right after we launched your story. Can you tell us about that process of writing, editing, and photographing your book?
Yeah, that was a really great project for us to be able to just sit back and reflect for a while. Of course, it was a lot of work, but very different paced work than we had been in the groove of for the years prior. Sitting down and thinking about why do we do the things that we do, and being able to collect all of the photos that we had taken in the last few years. And it was just a really cool, different project for us.
Do you have any advice for people who are wanting to leverage social media to build a customer base for their rurally based business?
Well, I think social media is really an amazing tool, especially living rurally, because you can share what you love and what you're doing that people might not know about otherwise. So if it starts with passion and you're excited about it, other people will feel that too. There's, of course, all the things people suggest about posting, like posting frequently and posting quality photos. We at times have really held ourselves to posting every day. And then this year we're feeling a bit like that was taking over our lives more than we would have liked. And so we're taking it a little bit slower now, but still having an understanding that it really has an impact on our business.
How do you schedule your day? Do you have a set schedule that you follow every day for content creation and keeping up with the inn, or does it change constantly?
I think we'd love to have a more set schedule. Something that we talk
Yeah.
about all the time, being like, oh, maybe we could spend from like 9 to 11 doing this or whatever. But things just come up all the time. Like after this call, I have to go fix the dishwasher. I didn't know I was going to do that when I woke up this morning, but that's what I have to go do. So
Yeah. There's pretty much no way of us actually saying, oh, Mondays we're going to do this and Tuesdays. Like that sounds so nice, but I don't think that's going to happen. And we end up working through the weekends, and then sometimes we'll take a weekday off or whatever, vice versa. It's always different. I don't know.
Yeah, but we are trying to be a little bit more, as much as possible, like take a day to ourselves. I think we talked about that being Sundays, but then something will come up on a Sunday and then we can't. But we're trying our best now to set time aside that we can like really, I guess, just do something different.
What advice would you give to someone just starting out who wants to get into hospitality that you wish you would have known going into this process?
Well, I think over time we've had to learn to not take everything so personally, because we've been so in love with these spaces and our idea of how someone will experience it, and knowing that not everyone is going to have the same experience, and that doesn't always have to do with us. It could have to do with whatever they're personally going through. And if they don't have a great experience, it's not always on us, and not taking that personally has been something that's taken us a while, and we're still working on it.
Yeah, it always hurts, but just trying to take a step back and analyzing it a little bit more.
Yeah, and knowing that you can do everything that you can, and that's all you can do, and just being okay with that.
Let's see. I mean, we've talked about a lot of it. Can you talk about plans for Pasada in the future, in addition to being a place where you can stay? What other things are you bringing into Pasada that are unique?
Well, we're really excited that Pasada has the opportunity for community. So there's more communal spaces where we can have chef dinners, and we have a yoga room for yoga classes and sound baths, and we're starting to carve out some trails on the property, which is really fun, and just be able to bring people together. That's definitely a really cool thing for us. And then we also have a space that we're going to be starting to work on soon, where we would like to host artist residencies, chef in residencies, or any people creating something, writers, musicians, to come and stay on the property for a given amount of time in that space and just create. We think that would be a really cool energy to have on the property. So we're going to be renovating that space pretty soon.
All right. Well, I so appreciate the two of you taking the time to speak with me today. And I'm just so inspired by what you have created. Um, and, and by what you're building also just to help people basically do in a small way what you have done for full time, which I think a lot of people need a place to unplug, a place to unwind, if even just for a moment away from the chaos of it all. So I think it's really great what you're doing. And it's amazing how you are able to work together and take these big risks and have these dreams visualized in real life.
Thanks, Alyssa. That's
Thank you.
awesome. Yeah.
It was great talking with you.
Since I recorded this conversation, so much has changed for everyone, including Sara and Rich. They sent me this short audio postcard about what the past several months have looked like for them.
We're out here in the Sonoran Desert today in Tucson, Arizona, looking out to saguaros and sunshine lighting up the cholla cacti and the mountain ranges surrounding us. It's all very calm and beautiful, and the birds are very happy this morning.
Though it's been such a crazy year, as it has been for everyone, it's one of those moments in your life where you take a moment to reevaluate what you're actually doing and see if you're on the right path or if it's a time for change. So this year has been one of those years that's it's been very trying, but we've kind of realized that this is something that we want to keep on doing, that like we're very passionate about, and we feel that if things went in such a bad direction for our business, that we would do everything that we possibly could to save it and go down with the ship if that was the course that that we ended up going. This year has also made us really miss our community. When we opened up our inn in Tucson, one of the things that we just loved about doing that was the communal space and getting to meet so many different people coming through and getting to be social with guests and having fires and dinners and so on. So we've been really missing that, and then missing the communities in Joshua Tree and Tucson, local businesses, restaurants, and so on. It's been a very difficult year for all of us, but that's something that we've been really looking forward to resuming next year when everything hopefully gets better. But overall, we're feeling pretty optimistic about the directions of where our business is going and for 2021.
We've generally found that discomfort is a sign of progress, and though this year has been so dark, it's been a time for learning a lot. I think we all collectively have been learning together. So coming out of this pandemic, I can only see that our community and our world will become stronger and more connected and understand each other in a deeper way.
Thank you for tuning in to our interview with Sara and Rich. To learn more about the Joshua Treehouse, you can visit their website, thejoshua.treehouse.com, and follow them on Instagram at the Joshua Treehouse. Sara and Rich's book is called At Home in Joshua Tree, A Field Guide to Desert Living, which can be found wherever books are sold. You can find Sara and Rich's feature from 2018 on urbanexodus.com. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Urban Exodus. To read more in-depth features on folks who ditched the city and went country, just visit our website. Join us next time for my conversation with Stephen Carter, the farm manager at Scribe Winery in Sonoma, California. Stephen left the Bay Area and a job at famed restaurant Chez Panisse to farm organically in California's wine country. We discuss his journey into growing and the obstacles in the way for new farmers without land access or generational family wealth. We also get his perspective on farming during a pandemic, farming during California's historic and devastating fires, and being a Black farmer living in a small town during a time of extreme racial tension in our nation. It is an important conversation, and I hope you'll tune in. Urban Exodus is a tremendous labor of love. If you like the content we create, please consider supporting our efforts on Patreon. If you are a small business and would like to sponsor an episode, please visit the podcast page on our website to learn more. An enormous thank you to the incredible people who have helped make this podcast possible. Production by Simone Leon, editing by Ari Snyder, and music by Benjamin Bethurum. I'm Alyssa Hessler, and this is the Urban Exodus. Stay joyful, stay kind, stay resilient.